conceived my collections together, Leighton Couture and also Other Faces. So Other Faces was my genesis, and it just they're makeup wipes, but these makeup wipes are actually artifacts from my live performances and my going out in nightlife for the last 8 years. So yeah, when it came for my time to build a Genesis collection within the NFT space, we thought this was perfect because it kind of they were artifacts of those real life experiences of myself in fashion and also having those interactions. And yeah, recently this year we did Latent Couture, which was also using my archive of photo shoots and live performances and experiences as reference, using them as reference images and feeding them into the AI to develop this collection. And I guess in the process of it, uh, at the time, I think digital fashion was still kind of no one really knew what was happening with it or where it was going. But at the time, AI was new. No one, I kind of had that awareness that no one had done a digital AI fashion collection. So I kind of like had this tunnel vision that like if anybody's going to do an AI fashion collection, then I want to be one of the first. And so yeah, we did this collection, which released I think in March or so. I can't remember, or April, which had a good impact in the space, and a lot of people welcomed it. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Ezra.
Hi. Yeah, I'm not Mikey's partner, as I guess was introduced, and Mikey asked me to join as a mentor. Oh, Mikey dropped out. He'll be back. Yeah, okay, Mikey will be back. Mikey asked me to join as a mentor because we, as what was mentioned, worked together on designing these collections, and like my role in doing those was kind of, I mean, we've known each other for I don't know, 9 years or something, and I got into the crypto art a bit before Mikey, and then what we did together there was kind of like looking at the history of Mikey's engagement with being a live performer, with being like a presence, an icon, and also just Mikey's also a painter and a singer, and we're looking at the challenge of how to take a body of work like that, a lot of which was is immaterial work, or the kind of art that doesn't have a specific product, or a kind of art where the value of it is in the moment, in the impressions on, and in the interaction with people. So we looked at how to make that into something that makes sense in the context of tokens, and in the context also of the super particular culture of crypto art. And the same case with Leighton Couture, and I think, like, for me at least, I guess maybe for both of us, that's sort of the perspective that we are coming with to the residency, is approaching the question of how to take a artistic practice, a body of work, a presence in the culture that a person has, and meet the context of crypto art space, and to also to what it means to frame things through tokens, and all of the various cross sections of meaning between tokens and symbols, tokens and values, tokens and cultural ideas, and that has to look at that overlap with fashion statements and tokens as vessels of those ideas in that way, and I guess kind of look at what makes sense for framing a collection, for designing it and meeting the context, and looking at what that structure means of doing this in the context of crypto art. And so I'm a mostly a writer, personally. Like poetry is more my main background, and since in the crypto, what I do now is I run an art platform called Sovereign Art, together with Pindar Van Arman and Justin Island, the developer, that we're a indie platform, and we do we release indie crypto artists and work with them to do all that stuff I was talking about. So that's my introduced. I guess now we take questions from you all. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense. But I feel like looking at, there's a question. How did you find starting a new platform about crypto art? So is that a question? How did you choose the artists to support? Like, which artists did we curate for the?
Well, this
for
was I mean, this
Sovereign?
is I guess I could start off with that, because I think in me conceiving latent couture, I kind of went forward into the future to see like what opportunities are there and like what was going to be my drive, and I kind of knew that that Sovereign was potentially happening. Also with the knowing of like no one has done an AI fashion collection, so I kind of knew that I don't know, I looked out for opportunities. I think that I looked out for the opportunity and I kind of went for it, and then we released Latent Couture as the first collection on Sovereign.
Yeah, the Latent Couture. Well, Latent Couture was the first collection when I was on Sovereign. There were a couple. That was like our first. But I guess maybe the question is about was like from Isa Duska, about starting a platform, choosing the artists, and then Decentralized is asking about running, curating an art studio with artists and buyers. Yeah. So, well, the platform. This is It's Mikey's collection, Latent Couture, is on Sovereign, and Sovereign has done the 13 collections now, and it got started in a very kind of, it wasn't originally intended to be a full-on art platform. Pindar Van Arman and Justin made the first moves in starting that, because they had done a collab project together, and Justin is a developer and wrote a contract for Pindar to do collaborations with, I think it was like something like 50 different people. And then Pindar is has been in the space for a long time. He was one of the early super artists, and got to, is in a community of people who were doing one-of-one work on super in the early, in 2018 or so. And he saw that a lot of the artists who had success as in the early stage doing one-of-ones were then struggling in 2021 or so, when there was a major shift in the culture. And in order to meet that turning at that point, he worked with them to make serial collections because of the dynamics had changed in 2021 that you know serial collections, larger collections became more important because they were a way to have a larger collector base, a larger audience, which was important because that was a time of a lot of adoption. And so having serial, you can address more collectors, and also just because of the aspect of serial collections are more liquid and people are more willing to enter into them because of that, because of the potential that they're more liquid. And that was a defining dynamic at that stage. It still is of what can produce the willingness for someone to collect what you're offering. A lot of it is both positively and negatively, because there's a feeling or an idea that it can be traded. And the negative side of that obviously is that there's a lot of people who only will collect things only to flip them, and it's cheapening. The positive side of it is that it brings in a lot of potential to sell things that would never be able to sell otherwise. Obviously, the experience that many artists have had in crypto art, of coming from a background of having a super hard time getting into galleries or selling any kind of art. So I mean, that's the other side of that coin, is that the flipping and the liquidity and whatever, and it
I guess
makes a willingness to what do you say?
I know. I guess from my artist's point of view of doing a 500-piece serial collection, from what I learned, it made I think people in the crypto art space, that everyone's looking for connection and they're wanting to be part of the what's next, and I think part of doing latent couture and having such hype around it and excitement at the time of when we released it, it made me realize this is why having a 500-piece collection is important, because it can take so much stress off the artist in the promotion and the grinding of having to sell. So when we released it, it sold out quite soon, and there was such an excitement and joy of people collecting it and sharing it, and it made me realize this having these 500 people collecting it, you know, that took over me from having to market it or me from having to push it out there into the world. It was the community and the crypto art space which did that for me, and that's why it's important, or that's why it's a good thing to do a larger collection, because it takes that stress of having to do the grind of having to sell
Yeah,
out.
well, that that is a great example of the way that went down. And that was one of the reasons back in the founding of Sovereign, why there was a reason to do it. So because the first artists on the platform were one artists who were from Pindar's community of the super rare people, and it was a way to adapt their art to meet the market dynamics that Maggie's talking about. So those were the first curations, were people that Pindar knew, and he kind of looked and saw, if you did this and that a little differently, it could hit. And the 13 artists who have been on there so far have come from that group of the super community, and then from people who we got to know basically through Pindar's projects, through his big hands, and we're in like a different phase where we're starting to reach out to people who are not in either of those categories, and we also want to look at the possibility of being able to produce projects like in the way that, you know, it could be fun. But anyway, the curation that we do is not based on an aesthetic. It's based on more the values of the artist. It's just important to us that we're an indie platform and work with indie artists who value that and value
Also the
basically the principle of sovereignty and what was it?
yeah, and just the participation in the crypto art space in general. No?
That's another thing that we look at. It's important to us. Yeah, like engagement with the culture itself, like contributing like consciously to the culture. Those are
If anyone wants to ask a question with their mic on, we'd love to hear voices, and
so.
don't be freaked out. We are also freaked out.
But yeah, no, I saw like a lot of the people in the residency. There, I saw there's a number of people with backgrounds who in specifically in digital. I saw like a couple of people have done university programs in digital fashion, and some people who from physical fashion. I think there's also some generative artists among the residents, and a lot of different backgrounds. But and you guys had a kind of a technique class last week, but I'm like, yeah, I guess what could be useful from us is if you have any curiosity about how to make your own practice into to something that to fit the context of like being tokenized and being in crypto art, I guess, or well, or whatever you want to ask. Decentralized has a
Okay, so we have a
oh, right on, yeah, of course.
and Mikey, they're absolutely amazing. What kind of virtual performance could be imagined, and maybe how can they be manipulated with its medium?
Can you
Hey,
hear me?
Joyce.
Yes, I'm just reading the question in the thing, but yes, please go ahead and
Yeah, go
Hello?
ahead, Joyce.
Joyce.
The volume, I can't hear you guys at all. Bear with
Okay.
me.
Can everyone else hear us? Is it okay?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Joyce.
Okay.
Oh, so sad. Okay, I'm just gonna speak, but I don't even know how I'm gonna hear you guys. My question is to understand the physical and the digital. Like, how do you bring those two worlds together in terms of sales? If you were to sell your NFT, how do you go about selling your physical products as well?
Maybe I answer that, Mickey?
Sure, you can go
Yeah.
first.
Do you have I would say
Yeah, you go first.
okay. Yeah, I kind of so my perspective personally on what it means selling things as digital tokens is that it's much more about trading and a kind of like having a currency for the value of what a person brings to the culture, as opposed to the trading of the thing itself. A token is like fundamentally a vessel that is assigned a value, and it's intrinsically different in that way from transacting a physical object or even an art object. So people transact as a form of expression, particularly in the cultural sector, and very particularly in crypto art. So there can be, like, for instance, with the way that Mikey's work exists, like a lot of it happens in physical spaces, but the actual what could be called like the art of it is not a physical object, or even a recordable. So I think it's the same for immaterial art and for representing physical object art as tokens. I think it's always, in the end, a question of making something that can communicate as a vessel for the overall value of the practice and for the person's presence in the culture. And the transacting associated physical objects, I think, is like tangential to what happens in the realm of tokenization of crypto art, which is fundamentally a way of creating, I think, many cultural currencies. Like an artist's collection, an artist's body of tokenized work is like a mini currency, a very specifically denominated currency of the value of that art in the overall culture. Oh, Mikey's downing it. And of in the way that like a nation's currency is like the value of, or the value of the nation, but their defense, like a person's collection is the currency of their contribution to culture. So like,
Can I jump in there?
yeah, you can jump in.
Yeah, I guess I will try to give another perspective, or do it in different words. I guess what Ezra's trying to say is like I think building resonance as an artist is the main thing and the most important thing that you can do. So yeah, everything that I do, from live performances to my DJ sets to going out in nightlife dressed as fashion, I might not be getting paid for these things. Like 90% of the time I'm not paid for these things, but all those things that I do, making that effort and having the courage to go out in the world as this presence and as this performer, this is bringing back value now to the tokens that I've created on the in the crypto art space. And yeah, I think that's the main thing, is to build resonance. And I think because we're in this hyper financialized culture of crypto art, that you think that we get caught up in this thing that we have to sell. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, for me, is like what was important for me to realize is to not focus on sales or selling at all. The focus is adding value to the culture, creating art as much as you can, and I think opportunities will come your way, but you first have to build that resonance first, and this may take months, years, or however long it takes, but it comes with like a lot of resilience and a lot of lessons to learn in the process of it all.
Yeah, like having a cultural presence, and people value that. Like a lot of there's a small amount of actual collectors in the space, and particularly now, but the people who are truly here as real collectors, and who care about the culture, they they're looking at the sustainability of the scene and like the survival of the scene, and it's important to see that the people that you're, being involved with, the people that you're collecting are going to be building that culture, like truly, dedicated to it and contributing to it. And you know, there are signals that one sees from people, the way that people communicate on their timelines, the way that they address their audiences, like the choices that you see. That's one of the signals that people are reading. What degree of dedication this person has to the scene overall, and like to building the vitality of the and helping the culture to survive, because who knows, it might, it's like a total unknown. So yeah, like feeding like true vitality into it in the way that Mikey's talking about, is often more valuable than price tag on a thing. And it's that, in a way, like one of the ways, there's many ways, but like in a way, like building that is building one's cultural currency. And like, if this scene works at all, then it's a way of making cultural value also into having like a sustainable amount of financial value and resources. So yeah, like it's something, yeah, like, yeah, giving life into the offering life into the culture is something that people who care take notice. And so yeah, I mean, that is totally an important way. But there was another. Oh, but with physical objects in particular, like so for instance, Pindar, who was the co-founder of Sovereign, had been a painter, like a physical painter, for a long time. He does robotics painting, and he tried for years and years to get his art, his paintings, into galleries. He obviously wanted to be in gallery, and then but it wasn't until he had success with his crypto art, with his digital stuff, that the galleries took notice at all. And that's a financial thing, I guess, also because it's like, oh, they want to be involved with the new technology, but like mainly they just took note because he generated that volume or whatever with his art. And then now all the galleries are coming to him. And I think that applies to the relationship between physical art and the digital art or crypto art space, in that, like, I think it's important to look at the stuff that you tokenize as something that is more of a vessel for you overall than it is making a tokenization of a physical object. And then the momentum that you can generate within the digital culture, within the crypto art world, can be directed and applied towards physical objects. I think, to me, that approach, at least in this phase of where the culture is at, it seems like it has a better potential than ways of looking at how can you transact physical objects via tokens. It makes sense to be first to do things that are really adapted to the context, and generate momentum with that, and use the momentum to direct it to physical objects. Because it's like, at the moment, there's like a lot happening with physical counterparts and physical objects. It's like a lot of the platforms I see that do visual art are doing prints, and looking at prints, and there's a lot more physical sculpture, but it still is very clunky. It's not really figured out yet. It's like probably like many more months until that really is a thing. And so to my mind, it makes sense to, like, to work first very specifically with the crypto art culture as a particular medium, and to meet it and use that towards just as an indirect momentum in that, in regards to to physical objects that Joyce was asking about. I think is that what you're asking?
Um,
Yeah, I just had some issues with my sound, but yeah, I heard that. Thank you so much.
Right on. I hope it makes sense. Is there a
Yeah,
particular?
yeah. So for me, I've been making physical things for many years, and it's in the last 2 years that I've fallen in love with 3D modeling and gravity sketch within the footwear space. And luckily, being in this residency, learning about crypto and NFTs and actually ownership. I think ownership was the strongest thing for me, because a lot of designers or artists in the physical space struggle with actually having any form of ownership of their work, be
Yeah.
it financial or royalties and things like that. So as we're in the web, we're going to the Web3 space. I'm very interested to see how these two worlds coincide, the physical and the digital. So you've explained it eloquently. Thank you so much. Yeah, and in summary, for me, it just feels like it's how we go about, even when it's just physical, having a story or a fight or something you're resonating with, creating that community and not doing it for a sell, like you're wanting to sell this amount, but no, you're wanting to give to your community to be of significance, and then attracting the community, and then building from there. So that's what I got from you guys and your explanation. So thank you.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I think it's like making the what becomes like super relevant in the token context is the aspect of the design that is the story, or the fight. Like that is what kind of is like the element that enters into being like um being a presence in the digital culture. Like that's what is important, is that like people talk about that, and the token of the 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 shoe, or whatever it is. The job of the token is to embody the story, the the concept of the work, rather than I and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I think rather than being a very well designed visual of the shoe or whatever it is, like rather than being like a 3D visual, what the token needs to do, and what the presence in the context of tokens needs to do, is communicate very clearly and very presently the story of like that, that aspect of what the physical fashion is. I think. I don't know. I know that like a lot of there's like a main branch of digital fashion that is wearables, and that's like something that I maybe we should talk about, like what
That's what
like
I'm gonna go into. As you're talking, I was just thinking about like when I built Leighton Couture, I wasn't thinking about like a digital wearable. I was thinking about how like because you're trying to capture something in a flat image or something digital. So how can we take that essence of what fashion is in real life, and when a person wears it in real life, how can we translate that power into a digital image? So I think I don't know where I was going with my Leighton Couture is like I was referring to nature a lot, and like trying to probe the essence of queen energy, and just, I don't know, trying to figure out ways to translate that essence of, when a human body activates the outfit on a person, it comes alive, and you can see it in so many different frames and dimensions as it moves on a human body. So how does one go about putting that into a digital image in the metaverse or the crypto art world? And yeah, I guess at the time I didn't, in conceiving Lady Couture, I didn't maybe realize that also in the process, but I think I realized that in the finishing of the collection and putting it out into the world, and made me just realize that like that collection is just, it's just me doing what I've always been doing in art, and that's bringing art to the world, and that's creating beauty for the world. And I guess I focus on like this frequency of joy. Even though I'm a super dark person, in Lady Couture, there's a frequency of joy that I think like just captures people. And I guess maybe because the technology was also so new at the time, that it kind of got people's attention more than my physical work and my live performance work. It was something new and fresh for their eyes, and going into digital space.
Yeah, it's the Lady Couture in particular, like, is phrased as a fashion statements, very very particularly, as and sort of as opposed to fashion objects.
I would
And
just
like,
share
what?
some images from I'm doing a new museum show right now that was open last week. So I'm just sharing some in the
Oh,
chat.
okay. Yeah, Gen Art Studio has a question of what do you think are the main ways people can express themselves in the same way as physical fashion but digitally. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because like, um you get, I mean, like, it's like brings the question of like, what is a digital body, like what is a person's digital body. And I mean, one way of addressing that obviously is like the classic avatar of a human form. But a person's digital body is composed kind of like every aspect of themselves that exists in a digital format. And like, in that sense, the expressions of identity that happen in the digital world are e- everywhere. Like, I think the main expression of fashion, like on social media, is an avatar, or the profile picture rather. That's a primary, I think, expression of identity through that form of digital body. But then also, it really includes, particularly with like crypto, the the person transactions as like form of communication and of statement, particularly in art. And so, I mean, there's another version of a digital body specific to crypto art, is what that person collects. Like, that's a formation of a form of digital body.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, like that people engage with these forms of digital body, 100 times more than they will engage with 3D avatars. And who even knows what the world of 3D avatars will look like, if it will be about human bodies. There's no restriction in that you need to be shaped like you're shaped in the physical world, even in a 3D world. But to me, only thinking of 3D worlds is missing a lot about the way that fashion exists in a digital context, because it's like, and it's also crazy to think of like what the next years will be as people will come like hyper digital, what the choices will be in how they form their digital body. Probably, I think people will probably think about it a lot more consciously. Like, I remember I'm dating myself, but in the early days of Instagram, I remember a shift happening in Instagram when people started really, really curating their own timeline and really making their timeline look like a portfolio. Really, making it like very slick, very, very curated. And because they had become conscious that that is the site of their digital body in a sense, like that what functions as their portfolio and as their main interface professionally and whatever. So I kind of think in the next years, like people will have a much more of a conscious understanding of what it means to be forming in that sense, like how all of your digital engagements forms a very directed message of who you are, including that's like everything on the social media. But then with crypto, like it also the way you transact is part of your digital body, and that's what you make and what you collect. These are like expressions of what someone values, what they want to see continue in the world. So
Um,
yeah.
I
Go ahead.
will. I mean, I will add to that from my side. I think when approaching your pieces of digital fashion, I think there are like little rituals you can do in your real life, for example, like that allow you to pay attention to your own body, like putting on a different pair of shoes. It gives you a different posture to another pair of shoes, or putting a towel on your head and seeing how your body changes, and looking in the mirror and just observing those changes in your body. Like these little things like this can teach you so much about the nuances of fashion and how it can affect the body. So when you take those little observations, write them down and put them into your digital fashion work, I think this is a way to add that little elevated, or like add that essence into your work, to getting to know like the nuances of fashion and going out into the world with these little tasks and little rituals, and also like watching how other people perceive you and how other people react to different style choices you make. I think it's like super interesting, and that's as I said before, that's like my interest in what I love, playing with fashion and using it as a mask, not necessarily to hide myself, but to just dive into people's reactions and the psychology and the human nature of what fashion can bring to the world. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, right now. No, and I mean, if somebody is collecting, even if it is something that is a wearable or shaped like a human body, or like a version of physical fashion in that way, the likelihood is that the person is not collecting it primarily because they want to wear that thing in particular. They're probably collecting it because they value what it represents. And like there's so much more like leeway in that than in making a physical object, because you have to, like, in thinking of like, well, would it be practical to wear, or what can people wear in XYZ context. It becomes much more about like that, what Mikey is saying. I think like about what it what is represented by what you're doing, and that is like that's like kind of in a sense like the token of the action, and it that's what's tokenized. So yeah, we have to
Yeah.
the 10 minutes.
So we have 10 more minutes left. Do you have any other questions from people? Otherwise, Ezra can keep going.
I mean, I feel like I'm maybe being too abstract, but can keep talking.
Yeah, so I just posted pictures from a museum show that opened last week in Berlin for Berlin Art Week. And yeah, so we weren't allowed to put a QR code next to the collection, but I snuck one in the booklet, trying to bring the non-crypto world into the space of collecting. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting too. That's my first museum show, but I think it's also part of the latent couture and the AI fashion, and like the curators were so happy to see something new and fresh, and I think the collection brought them so much joy in sharing it last week. Where do you see the future of crypto going? Which museum in Berlin? That is at KINDL Centre for Contemporary Art. It's in Neukölln. If you're in town, you can write us a message and maybe I can give you a private tour.
Where do you see the future of crypto going? I mean, a lot of people, it's like it's a really rough moment right now, but and I think that's just because it like blew up way too fast and is like kind of naturally shining. Oh, you live in Berlin. Oh, right on. Oh, cool. Adore it. Yeah.
Lovely.
We'll come. Yeah, we can go there together to the KINDL. Adore it. But
yeah, I would.
The Micah question just to finish. Like I personally think it's like there has not been, up until the introduction of cryptocurrency and digital objects, a real conversion of the way that the economic system works that really incorporates the internet. Like there hasn't really been up to this moment a way of having currency that is not based on physical scarcity, and that's an enormous shift in just the way that society works, economics works. And I don't like, as to the degree that the internet is not going away, I think also like these mechanisms of being able to value and transact our digital lives is not going away. And it might look totally different from what it is now, but I think definitely this culture is the foundation of it, and whatever comes will grow out from this, you know. So I think that there's just like a much huger alignment with the shift in the way that society is working, that is just way beyond the, you know, downturn of like having a bear market now, or whatever the mainstream media is saying about NFTs and stuff now. I do feel, and that's a larger time scale, and I don't know when it'll super hit, but like just I really do think that there are like tremendous currents that go like far beyond the you know, movements at the moment of collectors leaving or collectors coming. To Micah's question.
Yeah, I would say just let the people leave that are leaving. I think like looking back, since I've been in crypto art, which is what, 2 years now, I guess. I think looking back, like the space has opened up so many opportunities for myself and new experiences, not just for myself, but I've been, you know, invited to invite my friends to be part of events and things, and also give them jobs. So it's opened up like more than just making sales or selling NFTs for me. It's like opened, you know, getting aligned with the right people and the right events and things that are doing things in the space. You can open up more doors and opportunities and add more value than just making sales, I think, and making friends.
Right on. Yeah. It's the culture, and I mean the fact that it remains as a vital culture is super striking to me. Like at the end of, like in early 2020 or like early 2021, and then again in early 2022, it felt like, is this even going to survive at all as a culture? And what's super hit me is like that it's like, is a functional culture. There are real people having real relationships and putting like real life in energy into this, who are here, and it is like it exists as a culture, and that's like amazing to me that it continues, but it is real. Like it's proved its reality. I think you know, like it's past the phase of is it maybe real, and it is a real thing. I think it's crossed that threshold. do can't so much, but still a lot to be done.
Yeah,
Yeah, clean
we
the
agree.
speculators. Yeah, a lot of the speculators are getting fucking washed out, which is kind of
I think
amazing to see.
to bring the like working with this museum, I think to bring that traditional art world into the space, into these new values, and like there's like so much to be done, and also like as an artist, how do we say no to like the traditional art world and be like, this is not good enough, and demand more for that culture to shift into this new one and the new ways. That's I think where the real work has to be done. Like artists really trying to be in both cultures, but also, you know what I mean? Like having to say no, but say yes and be generous and also put their foot down and be like, that's not good enough. I feel like I'm in this war of trying to be the mediator between both.
Yeah, you're really in both. I think one thing that stands out to me that the both the traditional art world and the fashion world have kind of ahead of us in the crypto world largely is that there's very little project funding in the crypto art world, which makes the dynamic so that things are very oriented towards having to like initially sell something. But I really like that's something I would trying to look into or try to do with Sovereign more is be able to have that kind of relationship with artists where like in the way that like you can get funding to do an art project, like you can write a concept and get funding to do it, and then it can be based much more on the integrity of the concept than just like whatever the sellability of the product. And I think we're still missing that like hugely in the art world in crypto, but like it happens in smaller pockets, but I think we can do a ton more with that, and that will enable the art like more substantial art to have a stronger presence, like because to change it from like having to rely on things that are designed just for sellability to be able to come together around like more complex concepts. So we're still behind in that. And I think a lot of people too who are leaving are not just speculators. It's like also a lot of people who really care about the culture are feeling super frustrated. And I think a big reason of that is like the superficiality of what extracts the vast amounts of the resources. But you know in the last months, it's been really encouraging to see that smaller projects that are really, really art oriented, like having true integrity as artworks, have been still finding resonance and having success, and that there there are more and more of like structures to launch something based on the actual value of the concept rather than just sellability of the product. And like there are maybe a critical mass of people who care enough about the survival of the culture and the elevation of the culture to make like go this kind of show where we can like do that's like you can produce a project. You can like start with a concept and a history and like produce a thing rather than just like buying huge volume. But it's happening.
Okay.
It's already starting to happen.
So I think that's our time. It's 4 o'clock now. I guess if we have any further questions, we can move over into the Discord or
I guess I don't know how.
yeah.
You can tag. You can write me on Twitter or just do a tag here.
Or what about we could also share our Discord, Ezra, because I I struggle keeping me up in Discord, but I'm in my Discord every now and then. But
They
yeah.
have a special channel here for the residency.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh here.
Right on.
Yeah, cool. Thanks,
Good.
everyone. Thanks for listening. Ciao.
Okay, well.